In this video I'm going to show you how to use volunteer t-shirts from Golowan, and I've been volunteering for lots of years, so over the years I've collected many t-shirts, and my mum and dad have also volunteered, so as a family we've got a lot of volunteer t-shirts, and I'm going to show you how to make a hat. So to make this hat, I've made myself a pattern which for a baby hat is 15 centimetres high and 19 centimetres across the bottom. If you wanted to make one for you, you could measure your head and then halve it, and don't forget to add on the seam allowance, and this one has already got a centimetre seam allowance included. So if you drew out 19 centimetres and then did an upright of 15, just draw a nice curve from the bottom to the top, and that will be a baby hat. So I'm going to have the nice Golowan logo on the front of the hat, so I want to try and position it so that I get most of the logo, remembering that there's a centimetre seam all the way around the edge. So I'm going to lose a little bit, but I don't want to lose the tops of their heads, so I'd rather lose their feet. So I'm going to use my piece of chalk and draw around the outside of the pattern. And that's one piece. You need 4 pieces for this hat. So the nice thing about this is the sleeves, actually, when you've chopped the sleeve off, it gives you enough fabric for the piece of hat. So you can use the 2 sleeves for 2 pieces, and then the front with the logo, or make it plain with the back. And if you've got 2 different t-shirts, so I've got a black one as well, I'm going to use the different colour for a nice contrast. So this is the baby hat band, and it's 19 centimetres but cut on a fold, so you get a longer piece, and 8 centimetres tall. And then with this one I did some little ears or antennae, which I was going to do in black so that it was a nice contrast, and I'm going to cut the hat band in black. So to make one of these hats, these are all the pieces that I've cut out. Now I've cut out little antennae. You could do little ears or horns or none at all. So I've got the 2 outer pieces cut out, and these are the 2 lining pieces. So that's 4 in total. And then I've got the 1 hat band, which I cut with a template, folding the fabric, and I place the template down and cut it round 3 sides so that the band itself is twice as long, like that. So to sew all these pieces up, I want to put the right sides together, which that is, of the lining, and sew all the way around the edge, 1 centimetre away from the edge, because that's the seam allowance on the pattern, not on the bottom. And then again with the outside pieces, I put the right sides together, and then this, if you're going to put antennae or ears in, first you'll want to sew around the antennae. I cut these out quite small, and I'm going to give them a very small seam allowance of only 5mm or so, just because if you give a big one then they get a bit too bulky inside. So I'll sew around the edge and then turn them through, and then once I've turned them through I'll put them into the seam while I'm sewing my hat, but I'll show you that as I go along. And then with the hat band, you'll want to fold it in half again and so 1 centimetre from the edge, just up the end here, so you get a continuous loop of fabric. And that's right sides together again. Before I start sewing everything up, I just want to explain that I'm using a ballpoint needle, which is for jersey knit fabrics, and that goes in between the knit of the fabric rather than making little holes in the fabric as it goes along. And for this I'm going to use, I don't have a stretchy stitch on the sewing machine, so I've got a very thin zigzag stitch, which just done a little bit there, and the reason for that is that if you've got a seam and you stitch it with stretch stitches or a zigzag, as the seam moves, which it will if it's a garment, it won't snap all the thread. If you just use straight stitches all the way down, as the seam moves, it's inclined to snap little thread and then you get holes in your seam. So I'll start sewing up the little antennae, and I'm only going to do a very small seam allowance around here. So once you've got your little antennae sewn, you want to turn it the right way round. It's a little bit fiddly, but if you've got a chopstick or handle of a little spoon or a pencil, you can just push it in on the end and then turn the thing through. And then give it a little poke to make sure it's a nice shape. There's your little antennae. The next thing I'm going to sew is the hat band. So I'm just going to do 1 centimetre seam allowance, so 1 centimetre from the edge I'm going to sew along the end. And then the lining. So the same thing, you just want to start there, work all the way around the edge, 1 centimetre in from the edge. So for the outer, if you've got little antennae or ears or anything, you want to pop them in facing down towards the bottom of the hat, like that, so the edges of the seams all line up. And then you'll take the other piece of your hat and make sure that the right side of the fabric, so to me, that's the side that's got the stripes with, you know, the little knit pattern, the outside of a t-shirt. Pop it down on top, and I'm actually going to put a pin just to secure these two little antennae here. And then I'm going to sew just as I did on the lining, 1 centimetre in from the edge all the way around the outside. And when I get to these antennae, I think I'm just going to do a little backwards and forwards stitch just to make sure that they hold in nice and securely. As you stitch around, make sure to take the pin out before your needle gets to it. So I've gone over the antennae, little reverse back, and then I can carry on down the side. Before putting this all together, I just want to clip the curves here, because as we turn the whole thing the other way round, this seam here can be a little bit bulky. So you just want to take a few little triangles out of the curved bit of the hat. Three on each side is fine at the top, and do the same on the lining. So now you've got all your pieces cut and sewn, you want to put them all together. So, before I turn this round, when you cut your little notches here, just make sure you don't clip into the actual seam, the stitches. So I want to turn the outer bit the right way round. Little antennae. The lining I don't want to turn because that's going to post up inside, and the hat band I want to open it out and iron the seam and then fold the whole thing up with the seam inside so that it's in half. Just trying to make sure that all of the edges are lining up. And then when they all line up, give it a press. And press the outer bit as well. If you have got a t-shirt print on one side, make sure you don't iron it on that side, because sometimes the print can come off on the iron or melt. So you want to take your lining piece, post it inside the outer piece, and then take your little hat band and I'll just get this one to show you how it's gone together. So the hat band raw edges up here and all of the hat raw edges are joining it. So if you see when I turn that inside, to do the stitching, you'll want to take your hat band and post it inside the hat with all the raw edges meeting at the top. And just to be neat, I like to have the seam going against one of the side seams, but really it could be anywhere. And then as I put this in, I'm going to put a few little pins around just to secure it while I sew it. trying to make sure that the fabric distribution is even all around the circumference. And if it doesn't look like it's quite fitting, all of this is very stretchy, so you can ease it gently into place, but without stretching it out too much. And also trying to make sure all your raw edges are at the same level. Now I'm going to sew all the way around the edge with quite a big zigzag stitch on my sewing machine. If you've got an overlocker, I used one here, then use that, that'd be great. But if you haven't, or you can't be bothered to get it out and thread it up, then the big zigzag is really fine, as long as you bind all the edges here. So I've got all my pieces pinned together, ready to stitch, and I've set my sewing machine on a nice wide zigzag so that it will keep all the edges together. So I'm just going to sew round the whole hem of the hat here. And I'm going to keep the edge of my foot against the edge of the fabric so that there's not much fabric between the edge of the zigzag and the raw edge here. And again, don't forget to take your pin out before your needle comes anywhere near it. And because all of these fabrics are stretchy fabric, try not to pull it as it's going through the sewing machine, because then that will stretch out the bottom hem of your hat. So you just want to ease it in gently. I'm going to overlap the stitches I did to begin with so I don't have to go back and forth. Now I've sewn all around the hem of the hat, I'm going to just trim the edges so they're all nice and neat. But be careful not to go into the stitches, you don't want to cut any of those stitches. So keep a good millimetre or two away from those. So that's all the sewing done. Missed a bit. All you've got to do is turn it the right way round. So you've got a little hat band, and that covers up all of the stitched edges. And to really finish it off nicely, I would give it an iron. So I've just given it a little iron to make sure it's all nice and even, and that's your finished hat, with a hat band that covers up all the loose stitches inside there. And you've got plain side or Golowan side and a nice black lining.